Welcome back, everybody, to another of our Web3 game development live streams. I'm so happy that you decided to join us today. If you're live already, amazing. You're one of the first 15 people already in. You're probably watching this part in replay, though. If you are one of those people watching us in replay, really encourage you to join live sometime, because that's how you get to ask questions and be part of the live experience of this. We've already got John R15. He's ready to go. He's saying, let's go. We've got other people jumping in. And yes, Mahmood, we are going to have a secret code today. So stay tuned. I'm not even going to tell you when I'm going to drop the code. Could be in the beginning, could be in the middle, could be the end. But as a lot of you know, we're giving out codes during the live stream that you can use to go up the Beamable leaderboard. So don't miss the codes. If you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, join the Discord. You're going to use that in a little bit to help us send up the leaderboard and help us get the message out. Thank you so much for doing that. So in the Web3 game development live stream, we talk about game development really from a game developer's perspective. So this is for you, the game developer, who you might be building a game. You're wondering why Web3 might make sense for you. You've already made the decision to go on Web3. You're trying to figure out things like which chain, what's the best practices, what are the technology, how should you structure your economy? Well, this is the talk where we try to expose more of that from people who are live and in the trenches, not just these pundits on the sides commenting like the whole KOL market about like what's cool or not. This is the builders. We only bring builders onto this program to talk about what they're actually building. And I myself am a builder. My name is John Radoff. I am one of the founders and the CEO of a company called Beamable, and we build live services infrastructure. So all the stuff you need for servers, multiplayer, social systems, economic systems, and yes, blockchain integration. And there's a cool backstory behind this particular episode. So the very first blockchain investor that came to Beamable was Solana. So Solana Foundation invested in Beamable, I think it was like 3 years ago, when this was just an idea and we were just building infrastructure. Now we're taking that infrastructure and we're building, as some of you know, the Beamable network, a new DPIN project. The DPIN project is also on Solana. So recently I was talking to the Solana super team over in the UK, and I said, you know what, I want to really talk with more Solana game developers who are the up and comers, who are going to be the big games in the future, who you're excited about from a super team perspective. And it took about 1 second. He said, you got to talk to Ems from Moon Boi. So without further ado, Ems, why don't you just introduce yourself first and how you got into all of this? What have you done before? And then we'll dive right into the studio and what you're building and everything next. But let's just start with you. Like, who is Ems?
So Ems is the founder and creative director of Moon Boi Studios. Also, most recently, now the co-founder of DDgaming. How did I get into this space? How did I get into game development? Let's start there. Very unorthodox route. My background's actually in music. Spent 15 years as a professional songwriter. COVID happened, shut down a lot of stuff. I had all of this equipment and I said, how am I going to monetize this? So jumped into voice acting, ended up working with a friend that was working for a game studio at the time, making a triple A sci-fi epic, connected to epic games as well. Ended up voicing 3 characters for them. Fast forward another couple of years, worked my way up the ranks to become creative director there, planned their whole rollout for the game, and then found something called NFTs, and I was like, whoa, what's this? This is pretty cool. Trading essentially online. I don't have to go to a shop. I don't have to verify or go through all this hoo-ha. Just right there in front of me, I want a piece of this. And then I spoke to the studio that I was working with at the time, and I said, hey, we need to be involved here. We need to get involved. And they just weren't prepared to pivot. So I left. And 2 weeks later, Moon Boi Studios was born. And that was about 3 years ago now. And since then, I've been building very closely with Solana, Currently working on our debut game, Moon Boi Universe. We've got another title as well, which was just signed off, and hopefully another one coming just before the end of the year. So lots of stuff in the mix.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about all those games. One thought, Enzo, you said you come from a unusual background for a game developer. Here's my own experience, having run a studio and hired, I don't know, we had 130 people at Disruptor Beam, the studio that I ran, and interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. If you had said something like, I came from a kind of a typical background, I went to college, got a CS degree with a specialization in game design, and then started a studio, I'd be like, wow, you're the first person who came from that background. Yeah. Actually, so I think that the usual is the unusual in this market. I've worked with people who were middle school dropouts, and actually, it's funny that you mentioned music. Like, some of the most talented game developers I've worked with come from a music background. Like the guy who was our top graphics engineer back at Disruptor Beam, who I've had as a guest on this show, by the way. His name's Jason Booth. He went to Berklee School of Music, and he was a touring musician. And then he got into game development, and that seems like that's more normal than people who just get a degree and suddenly become game developers.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk.
I think in any of the creatives, they all seem to it seems like if you're creative in one space, you can take those energies and definitely put them into something else.
We all may have the same mental disease, I'm afraid. Like the thing that makes us do something as high risk and crazy as being in the creative industries. Let's talk about Moon Boi a little bit more. So you just rattled off several projects that you're working on. First of all, that's a lot for a new studio to take on multiple things, but maybe take us through a little more of the journey of the studio and what you've done so far and what you're building towards. If you're doing new products, like why? What are they, to just share more. And by the way, Oscar can bring up video or content or anything for us as we go here and try to get this onto the screen if there's anything worth doing that with.
So I think let's start with Moon Boi Universe, and I think I would definitely describe that as a quote unquote passion project. When I wanted to start the studio, it was very much me pitching devs and saying, hey, I'm the new guy on the scene, but please come get involved with me. I've got this great idea, the idea guy. Come follow me, and then we can create something great. So Moon Boi Universe itself is a cyber fantasy RPG. Aesthetically, it will remind players of, say, like RuneScape or early Final Fantasy, so a pixel art aesthetic, isometric. And for me, an RPG with the discovery, or the new discovery to myself at the time, of NFTs and blockchain technology seemed to make the most sense. I knew that we would be able to explore the most areas throughout an RPG style type of game, simply because of the way that you interact, missions, achievements, collectibles, as well as trading. The new game, the new title hasn't actually been named yet, but I can tell you it is similar to a tactics game, and it will actually serve as a prequel to Moon Boi Universe. You can tell I'm a fan of Final Fantasy, so once again, like Final Fantasy Tactics. But the reason why, and you made a good point, for a new studio to take on several titles is rare. You want to make sure you got the first one and get that out officially and make sure it's good. For us, we had a really unique partnership set up where we were able to essentially just help out with the creative direction, utilizing Moon Boi IP, but we're not doing the heavy lifting on the dev side. So it's more of a partnership, but it still will come out underneath our studios, which, makes our lives a lot easier. And I'm always happy to help out from a creative standpoint, whether it benefits me directly or not. That's just how I operate in the ecosystem. And the third game is super new, hasn't been signed off or anything as of yet. But what I can say is, if you look through the Moon Boi Universe timeline, we recently announced a new voiceover artist who's fairly big in the UK, and there may be something there. That's all I can say. So people put two and two together, they can try and work it out from there.
And you mentioned you're working with Solana, which is a common origin for us at Beamable. And to be clear, like, there's about 10 chains that we support from a game developer standpoint with beamable. So it doesn't matter what chain you use if you want to build a game with us, but Solana is the chain that the DPIN itself, the decentralized physical infrastructure network we're building, actually operates off of. So we have our reasons for choosing Solana for DPIN, largely around the ecosystem, actually more than anything else. There's just a really vibrant DPIN ecosystem. So there's projects like Helium, for example, which is arguably the largest DPIN project right now. They're building a Wi-Fi network. That's why we went to Solana, because of the tech and the suitability for the project that we were doing. I'm curious what your reasons are, Ems. What's your thoughts on Solana as a chain for games specifically? Since that's although we are a network to support games, that's different than a game.
Yeah, no, I understand. For me, there's a couple of things. So firstly, I was introed to Solana, so I got the bring in, so to speak. One of my good mates in the space was basically begging me for 6 months. He says, "Hey, Ems, you need to get involved in this. This will really, I think you would excel in this sort of ecosystem." And I was like, yeah, whatever. I was kind of concentrating on my creative dev work at the other studio at the time, before I gave it a thought. Another thing was I attended, I think it was the first ever London Hacker House, that Solana put on. And even though I was in love with blockchain technology, there were certain things that were
Hey, did we lose connection?
I was wondering if it was just me. I was hoping it was just me, but it doesn't look like it's me.
Ems, you there?
Looks like Ems dropped off here.
Well, let's give him a minute to.
We'll give him a minute, and I'll. Hey, it's live TV. It's more than live TV. Live TV feels like it would be easy to do at this point. It's live TV plus all the problems of the internet and people connecting through whatever connection they have. I'll talk a little bit about Solana while we wait for Ems to reconnect here. Or maybe now is even a good time for the code. We don't have to take away time from Ems. What do we think? We also had some comments about this earlier, which is that we should pass the code on the screen in writing. So just so everybody knows, we always do that. So the place to look is down here on the bottom of the screen. As soon as I say this code, you're going to see it scrolling past. So you really can't miss it if you're paying attention. And I am going to give you the code momentarily. So I also heard give people a little bit more time if you don't speak English so that you get to know it's coming. So here's your warning. It's coming. It's coming in a moment. And then you're going to have 2 minutes. We like to keep it like really tight because that makes sure that you are really part of the live audience and paying attention. Frankly, we don't want to be the thing that you just run in the background so that you can grab a code and move on. So we got over 500 of you in the live audience. We'll do the code now. All right. So the code for today, get ready, Oscar, to drop that code on the screen. The code is GO, G-O. It could not be easier. It's that simple, GO. All right. So you got to get to the Discord server. You got to type /claim. How come it says yo? It's
jeepers. It's go. Let's just say this a few times for everyone that might,
the simplest code ever. We mistyped it. Sorry about that, everybody, but it's go. G-O.
Everybody, you want to go over to the Discord and you want to type in the secret word go. G-O. Golf Oscar.
Yep. All right. So that's your code for today. And we got people coming back in. Yep. I agree, Jau. We fucked up the text stream, but hey, live TV. We just want to show you that like the challenges of running live ops in real time and just how hard it is to run a live service. So it's GO. It's that simple. Go get your claim, move up at the leaderboard. Thank you, all of you, for being part of this and amplifying the message and learning about everything that we're doing. All right. So that's the code GO. All right, Ems, you're back. Sorry, we were just in the midst of hearing your story about why Solana. You were talking about the builder events that you participated in, and that kind of
Yeah.
got you introduced to them. But we're glad you were able to reconnect here. But that's live TV, and that's the internet, and we'll make do with it. So go ahead, please continue.
Yeah, no worries. I'm in a hotel right now, so it might be the Wi-Fi connection here. It is what it is. But so yeah, I attended a London Hacker House, and a lot of the issues or foreseeable issues, which I thought were great areas, I noticed that there were so many teams from around the world that were working on these issues. So for instance, like simple social logins, latency issues, you know, things that matter to the player. I'm not a technical dev, and I think that's my superpower. I think I truly approach games from the player experience, and I think ultimately, yeah, Solana was the first chain that I came across where the price point made sense and it had the speed to keep up with what traditional gamers are used to, as opposed to these other chains I won't mention, but that are slower. And I know we've got a bunch of L2s now, but back then you didn't. A lot of chains that are, or other chains, there was two main other chains that were slower and just didn't make sense in comparison to traditional gaming. So yeah, that's why I just went all in with Solana essentially.
Yeah, performance is a great reason to choose Solana, although it's less of a differentiator for them today than it might have been, say, 3 years ago when they were really one of those early, quote unquote, Ethereum killers, came to market with much higher performance and much faster finality. Today, you've got Solana, you've got Sui, you've got no end to the list of layer twos, EVMs that you could utilize. So there's a lot of choices out there beyond the performance. What's your sense of Solana? I guess I'll share some of the things that I usually guide game developers to think about. So yeah, performance is one, because if you're doing microtransactions in your game, like it really is as little as like 100 milliseconds of delay can actually decrease conversions. So you don't want to have to deal with that. Liquidity, on-chain liquidity is also really important if you're going to be launching a token or doing NFTs. That's just like a real economic aspect to think about. Solana, as well as the generalized EVM ecosystem, certainly have a lot of liquidity today that's pretty strong. A third is how well is that chain going to actually support you with things like grants and incentives to build on their chain? Because if they're building and investing in the ecosystem, that's usually a good thing. A fourth is just the developer ecosystem and the tools and support available. That's kind of like my big four that I usually point out for people to consider. And there really, in my experience, there is no one chain that's perfect for every developer, depending on the game and the tech and your particular audience and things like, is it targeting super crypto native audience versus a general kind of Web2 gaming audience? A lot of those things could shift the particular chain you want to use. And Ems, I haven't seen move his video in a little bit here, so I'm not 100% on Ems and whether he's present with us today. And
well,
there we go.
He is present. It's just intermittent. But
the internet is not present. He is present. The internet is not present where he's located.
I'm currently lacking electricity where I am, so we all make do with what we have at the moment.
Yeah, I guess the world's going sideways here. What can you say?
Well, don't look at the newspapers.
It's not okay, everybody. It is not. I'll say it first. It isn't not a predictor of the end times. I don't think this is the sign of the apocalypse. So don't panic quite yet. If you see a zombie break into my room, that might be it, but that's not happening. Not that I'm aware of. If it does, I wouldn't predict.
I mean, when it comes to Beamable, and at this point, do you have a preferred? You know, when you say Solana versus the others that you support, like what is the preferred one, or what's the one that you think is the smartest solution for people to?
Well, like I said,
right now?
There's never. First of all, we really want game developers to be invested in that decision rather than tell them what the best is. We support about 10. We take a chain agnostic position from a development standpoint because there's so many factors that play into it, including how helpful that chain is going to be in terms of doing things like user acquisition or funding into the game. And those are just real issues for a game developer that you have to consider beyond all the technical decisions and whatnot. I think we're at the point now in the market where the real technical distinctions, one chain to the next, at least from a game dev standpoint, it's now almost indistinguishable. Like everybody talks about how highly performant their chain is, whether that's Solana or Sui or the various EVM layer twos. So I'd say like the tech piece, like performance, how many transactions per second the chain can support, how fast the finality is. There's not too big of a difference between chains now. So that was not the case 3 years ago when people were trying to build games on Ethereum and it cost you $50 in gas fees just to buy a $2 item like that. And it took a half hour before it would reach your wallet. Like that was 3 years. That was literally 3 years ago. And kind of the same way it is now if you choose to use Ethereum mainnet, not or the principal Ethereum, the layer one, as opposed to all the layer twos that are kind of hooked into Ethereum. So in general, I tell people, it's time to look beyond the purely performant characteristics. But we got Ems back. So Ems, you should dive back in. And sorry for the internet that you're dealing with.
No worries. I'm not sure if it's my end or what's going on, but I'm here. It's trying to rug us, but we shall not be rugged. Another thing I was going to mention about Solana was the social aspect. From a builder and just from a purely social aspect as well. Solana just knows how to do events, knows how to do networking events, knows how to do like highly intensified, highly focused. Shout out to Ellie that leads up events on Solana as well. Like there's just a lot going on at all times. And from a builder perspective, that's what you want. You genuinely feel the buzz. And this is my 3rd year integrating with Solana and getting involved in Solana events, and we're like 3 hackathon wins deep, and I still feel as excited as I do when I go to an event as I did maybe 2 years ago. So that's not a small feat, and I think that's just from a builder perspective. You want to feel like you've got other builders that are shoulder to shoulder with you. It allows you to tackle problems together and get over certain hurdles. And then you want to know that there's people that are engaged, that want to try out your new Web3 features that you've been slaving away at, that are highly engaged on the other end, on the consumer side of things as well. And I think Solana fits that bill. I am also aware that it's, at some points you can exist within an echo chamber, but the blockchain isn't easy. So for me, building with Solana was a choice that I made and that I've doubled down on. But it doesn't mean that I'm like writing off all other blockchains, or we'll see who the winners are and pan out to be. But as you said, they're pretty much, a lot of them are non-distinguishable now, which wasn't the case when I jumped into this space. But it's a beautiful thing to see. I think you're on mute.
Now I'm muted. All right, Ems, I'd love you to talk beyond the blockchain piece. And you've been at this for 3 years now. I'd love to learn more about your journey as a game developer and really what you've learned about that. Like for the audience that's here today who are building games, what should they know, especially if they're just new to this and they want to become a game developer? Probably one of the hardest things you can do artistically or creatively that they're taking. And by the way, I want to invite the audience to ask these questions too, just before you answer, Ems, which is, we've got 747 people in the room right now and growing. So thank you all for being here. This is an awesome opportunity to ask about game development, ask about Web3, ask about Web3 game development, whether you're a game developer and you have a question oriented towards yourself, or if you're just someone looking for a little alpha in this market and you want to learn more, we're happy to talk about that too. Or if you want to know about Solana and building on Solana, either a game or generally, like you've got a couple of people, Ems and myself, who are building on Solana, so we can say a lot about what this ecosystem is like. Ems, what have you learned in the last 3 years that you would pass on to new game developers?
I would think not only was I new to blockchain, but I was new to independent game development. So I didn't jump in the deep end. I don't know. I basically backflipped into the deep end and said, "Yeah, let's go." So whatever plan that you think you have, I would say, and this grandiose idea for the best game in the world that's going to scale it down. Scale it down. There's no problem with dreaming big, but scale whatever you're trying to achieve down to basic gameplay and mechanics and figure out what the core mechanics, and I mean, this is game design 101, but what those core features, what those core mechanics in your game are going to be. Once you've decided that, if you think you've got a plan, go through it again, plan it again, because once the money starts flowing and you start investing, it is so easy to chuck money away into a black hole. I'm fortunate with, as I said, with my background in music, I had a few pounds to spare, so it was literally like I was literally dunking money into a black hole, trying to fail quick and and learn. And and I had a chip on my shoulder from the last studio, to be honest, as well. I wanted to prove everyone wrong that I had something and I was going to make it. And I think you need grit more than anything. If you're the type of person that hitting a brick wall sends you into a spiral, then maybe being a founder, game designer isn't for you. Maybe pick a team where somebody else is going to head that up and lead for you. It definitely takes a certain type or certain types of people to be able to spearhead these types of things and spearhead any company, let alone a game development company. Let you not be fooled. This is one of the hardest, and I feel like it's a bit cliche because I'm in it, right? But I feel like it's one of the hardest industries to not just survive in, but to also survive and then be successful in. And what I'm super proud of when it comes to Moon Boi Studios is, as far as proving ourselves as legitimate game developers, I think we've done that. And as I said, these other projects that we've taken on, these all happened within the last month or so. We've won different competitions and whatnot over the years, but it's really been a real rough and tumble proving grounds for ourselves. So yeah.
So just, I'm curious about the distinction between your experience as a creator in music versus games. What one big difference, I could be way off here, but like, so first of all, I can play a couple of musical instruments, but I'm a total amateur. I've made exactly $0 in my life from music, but I enjoy music. That's a little different than being a game creator, where kind of the bar to entry in music is buy the instrument you can afford and start learning to play it, and you can start making music if you want to, right? Like, so no one's going to stop you. Games, it seems like it could be, in general, a lot more capital intensive to build at least a market competitive game. Is that a real distinction, or what are your thoughts on that, having been in both now?
I would say yes. Definitely a higher bar, like monetarily, to just jump in and be able to create. There's so much things to consider, like wages and licenses and all of these things. But like true grit with any startup, I would say find like-minded individuals that believe in the vision and understand the vision, and that you believe are capable of helping you to achieve said vision, and work shoulder to shoulder and plow forward. And fail quickly. And I know this is once again another cliche, but I really mean it. Like, fail super quickly so that you understand what sticks, what doesn't, what works, what doesn't, and double down on the things that work. Because you might have this grandiose idea and this really cool game mechanic that you think is going to pop off, and it doesn't. Someone likes the side mechanic that you just added in as a bonus feature, and then all of a sudden that now becomes your core gameplay. People start asking for more of that, and you're like, dang. So it's a lot of juggling. It's a lot of juggling. So yeah, I would say music's a lower bar. Anyone could literally, I could record into my phone right now, and then I could upload it to SoundCloud or to Spotify, and immediately that's being distributed to potentially. Obviously, it doesn't work like that, but it's potentially being distributed to millions of people instantly. probably within an hour. You could do that now from beginning to end. Whereas game design is just the creative process, and the technical have to marry up, and then bringing that to life is can take many hours before someone's even got something even relatable to a game that someone could even call a game. So yeah, big differences.
You're really pointing at something that I try to counsel all game development, and this is informed by a lot of years that I've had in game development. But one of the most important things in game development is just having high velocity in your development so that you can try out a lot of things. If you get hung up or stuck on things for months that the player isn't ultimately going to care about, such as you kind of pointed at, like maybe the game mechanic that you thought was amazing is not the actual game mechanic that the player is going to care about. Maybe you are tied up for months building infrastructure, right? That's why I created Beamable, is so that people could just start focusing on the fun rather than all these plumbing aspects, which are really, really boring, but they're also really important. If you get it wrong, you're out of business. So like, it's important. You don't want to do it as a game developer. That's just another example, but it really comes down to increase your velocity so that you can move fast, try things, but the things you're trying have to be organized around the test for what is fun and finding the fun and then refining the fun and really perfecting it, because that's what people are going to pay for your game for. There were 19,000 games on Steam last year. There was, I don't know how many millions of mobile apps published, mostly games. There's no end to choices that players have. They have infinite choices for games. It might as well be infinite, because even if you just limited your games to the ones on Steam only, I don't think you wouldn't be able to spend more than a few minutes per game across the entire course of the year, even if you spent all your waking hours just playing all the games that were on Steam. So like, that's obviously something players aren't going to do. It's not like music where you just press play, you listen for a little bit, and it match makes you to an algorithm of music you think it's like. You don't like it, you press next. Like, there, literally, you can listen to thousands of songs in a year if you want. Games aren't quite like that. Like, you really have to focus on the craft and the experience and getting them in, making sure that you can stand out amongst many, many things, because people spend hours, tens of hours, even thousands of hours in a game.
Yeah. And
what are your favorite games, Ims? What inspired you?
That's like my favorite game of all time is Final Fantasy VII. Like, my team is probably sick to death of me pushing that game, and the classic version, not the new one. I mean, the new one's all right, but the classic one. I grew up on games like RuneScape, Baldur's Gate, games where RPG, you take on a character, you live through that character, and you can level up that character in many, many ways. And I can see Gnome in the chat there said, I have a question. That soul-like games increased. Why? I think when people find something that works, they double down on it. All the studios run and try to copy, because a lot of the larger studios are now oversaturated. So they've got to make sense of, they've got to double down on data as opposed to just creative new creation. You're seeing similar things in the movie industry as well. And really and truthfully, I think it comes down to the indies, or those with a bit more creative freedom, to make that difference. The hardest challenge, I think, is, as you mentioned there, John, was getting any eyes on your game through all the mire of just so much. There's just so much out there. How do you, make a difference? How do you make an impact? And what I found is, you'd always get these few games that are, I'd say, the anomaly, right? That, oh, this one indie developer that was working on his game for 5 years suddenly just went to the top of and yeah, that's great for that person. But in reality, I would say, build your tribe, find your tribe, double down on the places where the gamers exist that like your type of game. So many gamers, they're trying to put games in front of people that just don't care about that style of game. Find your tribe and build with your tribe. Bring players in. For instance, I'll give you an example. With Moon Boi Universe, one of the biggest and best things that worked for us was live activations, and also bringing our players into test play. So they're actually a part of the process. The game's, you know, the game's still being built out, but they're getting to see the early rough cuts of what goes into a game, the mistakes, the problems, and you know, they're happy to list off the problems. And what I love is when you do that, they're a lot kinder about the things which they don't like, as opposed to you presenting something and saying, hey, here's a finished product, please trial this out and then tell us your feedback. People are they've got a lot less patience. Yeah. So yeah.
You're opening up the earliest stages of game development for input from the community, which I also think, by the way, is really wise. I mean, there's a marketing benefit to that that's kind of obvious, which is if people get invested in the game design, then they're going to tell everybody on earth about this game constantly, and you'll hopefully get to that word of mouth propagation that everybody hopes to have with a game, because it's the most capital efficient form of marketing that you can get. But also it helps you get that real feedback from your target audience early on. I think a lot of game developers are way too protective of their idea, as if the idea is the value. Look, if you haven't built a game before, you might think the idea of the game is what's amazing. Ideas are a dime a dozen, just like they are anytime. We could spend the rest of this talk coming up with a bunch of innovative, super cool ideas for games. The problem is they won't have value, because the value is actually the execution of a game. And that's what's really, really hard in game development. Execution, building stuff, hearing feedback, making the right choices, making the game smaller for the right reasons.
Yeah.
We've got...
I think I was just going to say that's something that we definitely ran into with Moon Boi Universe. Like, I sat down and I had the grandiose idea. Whenever I'm giving advice, I'm generally just talking to myself in the mirror. You know, the grandiose idea, Moon Boi Universe is like the name. It's going to be this open world epic. And then I was just like, no, let's reel this. Not only is it ridiculously hard to create an MMO RPG, the added element of blockchain, like early days blockchain, and integrating that, it just presents so many problems. I said, let's scale it down. Let's break it down into smaller games, and then we can even play about with the different aesthetics. But let's focus on different elements of the game and really focus on building IP. So Moon Boi Universe is just the first of many in the IP. The tactics game is going to be another game underneath the same IP. And just like I see someone there, they've mentioned Mario, one of the greatest game characters ever in the history of games. Like our character Dre within Moon Boi Universe, he is our version of Mario, or Sonic, or like Master Chief is to Halo. You know, you have to start from somewhere, and these things have taken decades. The good thing about the world and where it's at now, you can have a blinder where a character really touches so many hearts so quickly. You can reach maybe in what Mario took, 20, 30 years to achieve. You could now do in 2 to 5 years. But once again, everything has to go right for that to happen and to stick.
Let's expand out now to Web3, since this is the Web3 game development talk, and you're building on Solana. So you've clearly made a bet on Web3. Now, 3 years ago, one of the biggest reasons people would choose to build a Web3 game, let's just face it, was access to capital. So venture capitalists were throwing money at Web3 game ideas. All of the chains who were gaming chains at the time were throwing grant money and even investments at people. You could float an NFT, get $2 or $3 million overnight in an NFT composition. You could float a token, use it to fund your game. Like, there were many good reasons, purely from a capital standpoint, to try to take advantage of the market that existed like 4 years ago. And that would be a glide path to building a game. Now, we know what the result of that was. Like, most people who did it as a cash grab haven't really built much to show for it. Now, there are a few really great game developers out there that did. Like we're really proud of Beamable, some of the developers building on our platform who raised a lot of capital back at the time, like Wildcard Alliance, for example. But like Epic Game Developer, he built Age of Empires, he built Words with Friends. So like that's a good example of someone who's just going to take their time to build a game, not rush something to market. Today, there's not a lot of capital. If anything, Web3 might even be a strike against someone from a capital raise standpoint. Like not a lot of VCs are deploying capital in the Web3 games. So that leaves people who are building in Web3 with hard decisions to make. And you have to be here, I think, for the right reasons, right? It's not just capital incentive. For you, Ems, what are those reasons? Why do you feel Web3 games continues to be the right way to think about the business model of your game versus just launch a game on Steam? I mean, speaking of which, I mentioned Steam, but like other than the people who are just sort of playing the game of launching a blockchain game on Steam anyway, so by the way, it's a good idea. Like the worst they can do is just take you off. So why not get on there if you can get away with it? Like no problem. But mostly like that's not even like a friendly ecosystem for blockchain games. They'll take you off if they find out about you. Why would you be on blockchain today?
I think for me, several things, especially that came from the early testing days of Moon Boi. So yes, one of the first reasons I jumped into this space to create the game was from a capital standpoint, but also as I mentioned, I fell in love with the idea of NFTs. So I'm someone that grew up heavily on Pokemon, trading the cards in real life, and heavily playing the actual Pokemon game. So collectorship was always super important to me. I remember the old days of Game Boy Color, and you had to take the physical wire, and if you wanted to trade a Pokemon, they stick it into their Game Boy, you stick it into your Game Boy, and you're able to trade Pokemon that way. I saw an immediate draw to being able to trade digital assets outside of a game, but still being able to jump back into that game freely and not have all of these walls to be able to do that. Now, that might be a niche of a niche, but then that's why we stuck to an RPG, because I feel like that niche heavily falls within the RPG side of things as far as collectorship and collecting items. Another thing, I mean, we can go into the back end and as far as like transparency and blockchain security, but another thing that we found from testing was a lot of our players were in Brazil, Nigeria, like areas that we weren't even focusing on marketing to. And I was like, wait, why? So I started speaking to the community, and they were like, well, in your game, we have the ability to do X, Y, and Z, and our local currency is in the, is in the toilet. And your game is not only fun, but it allows us to do cool stuff with the crypto that we now rely so much on in our day to day. And I was like, wow, look at that. And with, I think it's like something crazy, like 70% of Africa as a continent is demobilized right now. There is huge opportunity for Web3 gaming and Web3 infrastructure just in general to just really change people's lives. And I know that sounds really like, oh my gosh, give me the Nobel Peace Prize, but literally, there is a huge opportunity there. So as you said, like funds and whatnot have been drying up. And I mean, it's been that way for the last year and a half, 2 years. We were fortunate to have some great partners early. I mean, shout out to Bonk, shout out as a, once again to Super Team, really put us in some great spotlight positions. Like our first ever test play was, we got, I think it was like 20,000 players within the space of over about 12 days. And this is with a partnership with Bonk.
Not just me.
Nope. I think we were just hearing about the 20,000 users he got to play his game. I mean, I will say that that's a big number to get into your alpha test. If, assuming they're real users, sometimes you scratch your head and wonder how many users are real. We've seen that ourselves. Hey, live audience. We've got 923 of you here. But as you know, there have been bots and people who've tried to invade our leaderboards, and we've done our best to try to fight that and actually added a lot of new qualification criteria for the next seasons of the leaderboard. So to try to manage to that. But 20,000 people testing out a game, that's probably more than I've had in most soft launches for a game, actually. Like when we built Star Trek Timelines or Game of Thrones, we definitely didn't have 20,000. We might have had 1,000 or something, and we did full commercial launches based on that.
Well, is it based, just in the excitement over what Web3 promises in the future? Or, it's like we see a lot of these examples that are just like very, very performant in comparison to other more traditional Web2 games, I suppose. Like, is a lot of that underpinned by just like this fervor to be on the next Web3 big thing?
Well, there is an aspect of like token incentives and rewards and things like that that potentially play a role. So I don't think we'll ignore that. I'll say that our Web3 community for Beamable is amazing. So I'm speaking to those of you here right now, all 928 of you who are tuning in. Like, you're an amazing community, and one of the ways we have learned that we can work with you as a community is there are people launching on our platform, and they suddenly need players to try out their game. And in some cases, we've gotten 100,000 people to show up and install a game, and we know they're real because they're not just signing up for the Discord. They're going in and they're like buying NFTs and things like that. Like we did a promotion for Pog Digital, and they sold out their whole NFT collection within minutes, and it was over 100. I think it was like 125,000. I forget how many items were sold in that. And that came about just because we were able to take the Beamable Web3 community, which have organized around our leaderboard for the DPIN launch we're going to be doing later this year. And there was just an interest in, amplifying and doing the things that are relevant to our community and going up the leaderboard. Yes, there's an airdrop. Yes, there's like that carrot that's out there, but carrot isn't just collect the tokens. I think there is something genuine to when people like get deep into these communities. I'll say deep in. I'm gonna have to figure out how to work those metaphors. The people that are deep into these communities, like, you kind of become a true believer at some point. It might have started with the incentive, but you start hanging out with people and hearing about it all the time, and suddenly you want to do everything you can to help out the community. Obviously, financial reward is part of it, and it's the socialization with everyone in that community that helps as well. So I see people asking about the airdrop hunters out there looking for the code. The code went out about a half hour ago, so sorry that you missed out. We hope you'll spend, the rest of the time in the program here, but show up at the beginning of the live stream. That's how you collect the codes. Sometimes they're at the very end, sometimes they're at the beginning. We like to keep you guessing because this leaderboard itself is a little bit of a game that we've put together to help you search out
keeping you guys on your toes.
That's right. So, Ems, we were talking about the 20,000 people that you had sign up for your game. That's just an incredible number to get into your game. Do you feel like were they just sort of like signing up to check a box, or were they playing the game? Like, what happened with those 20,000?
So we designed it in a way where they had to complete like a mini mission within the game to be able to get this tick box, and they were largely incentivized because Bonk was doing like a massive giveaway, and the more tick boxes that you checked, the more your airdrop would be, essentially. The good thing for us, we were one of only 2 games that were partnered with Bonk at that time, and we were still very much early development, but it was great because it became this wonderful experience for us, and it didn't even go smoothly. The funny thing is, Phantom, the most popular wallet at the time, changed their deep links, and it just messed us up like the whole time for about half of the campaign itself. So we had to figure that out whilst the campaign was live, and we still managed to get, as I said, around 20,000 plus players, but 300 transactions a day. When you compare that to traditional gaming, those numbers are crazy. And I was just like, wow, this is really like high. And then we ran another campaign about a year later, and we managed to get the same amount of numbers, but we didn't get as many transactions. But that wasn't surprising because there was no giveaway. But it showed that we still could do the same draw if we did this, a public facing event. And for me, it just every time something like that happens, it just doubles down. It's like, okay, we're heading in the right direction. We're heading in the right direction until this game is, ready for official release.
So a little while ago, you mentioned the ability to access new markets geographically as well. I didn't fully have an appreciation for this until relatively recently, to be honest, with Beamable itself, because we started attracting these massive communities, not only from the usual places you'd expect for gaming or crypto, but a massive onslaught of people from Nigeria, for example, a massive onslaught from Vietnam. So we were seeing a lot of these communities who were kind of traditionally unbanked people who were moving towards crypto because crypto is really where they're staking their financial future. It's where they'll actually be doing transactions. They're looking for applications that utilize on-chain capabilities just because it's actually easier for them now than other alternative mechanisms, and setting up a bank account is super hard for a lot of these people. So I didn't have an appreciation for it recently, or until recently. You were also mentioning NFTs. I just wanted to post this little article that I wrote. Let's see, it was 4 years ago now. I can't believe the date on it. So March of 2021, you were talking about you fell in love with NFTs. So everybody, like, if you want, check out this article, because not really anything has changed in this article since that time, which is, I do think that there is an inherent collectability to the way you can do NFTs. I go into it a lot more depth in this articles, but there's this opportunity to build. You mentioned, I think you mentioned Pokemon, right? Was that the game you were? Yeah. So my life was more Magic the Gathering than Pokemon, but like these are games that actually have proven tradable economies before there was anything like a digital representation of that. And the other thing too, though, that I think is more part of the future is, once you have a digital economy, there's no end to how you can build on top of it. That's the composability aspect that sometimes is mentioned around NFTs, which is, it can be transformative for game developers in the sense that today game developers build every aspect of the game. They build the game client, they design the economy, they release the items. In Web3, you'd have that on chain. But in the future, you could be someone who starts a game and kind of bootstraps it, and you actually open up that economy because it's on chain and trustable, and you don't trustable because there's no trust required. And you can have new kinds of games and extensions that actually build on top of it. We kind of called that the metaverse a few years ago, until Zuckerberg made that word far less sexy than it is it was initially. But this idea of composability is, I think, one of the really interesting aspects of what is inherent in Web3 and unique to it that couldn't be done any other way. Is that something that you think about as you're building your games, especially given you're building several of them?
So interoperability was one of the biggest draws for me. If anyone's seen Ready Player One, we dream of a world like that. But for Ready Player One to happen, all the big studios and all the big companies that own all of these IP have to agree. And I don't even want to know the size of the checks that would have had to be signed off for all of those, even if they're within the same company, to get signed off to appear on the screen at the same time. Crazy. We now can build that world for ourselves. And I think it's not so much the technology, but it's the attitude towards building within the space. And I hope if one thing that Web3 keeps is this open attitude towards co-working, co-IP sharing, and it not being so downtrodden as it is in Web2. Another thing is phygital. I'm really big into phygital. I feel like there's just so much potential to owning something, the physical asset and the digital asset. We've seen it in the art world on the blockchain as well, where the argument or the question came up, well, hold on, if I've just bought a one-of-one piece on chain, should I not therefore also own the one-of-one that's on canvas in real life? And it starts this debate. Some people are like, yeah, of course that makes sense. Others are like, no, that doesn't make sense. For me, for this niche of a niche that I was talking about, these people that are into collectorship, and for the people that played RuneScape all day long and stayed in the woods just chopping down wood, or they stayed in the mines just mining ore and then going and smelting that ore and then turning it into armor and selling it in the market. Those types of players, if they wanted to, they can create their own mini economy within the economy of the game. And that, for me, is priceless. Play the game for fun, of course. That has to be the first foremost call. You want to play because it's enjoyable. You want to play because it's immersive. You want to play because it's just cool. But if there are things within this game that if you want to take it down to the nitty gritty, and now you can share that with someone in Nigeria, in India, in Vietnam, in the Philippines, in Brazil, like that, no eBay, no middlemanning, no having to sign up, it's, that this is real because it's verified on chain. I can send it, zero latency, literally gets to you within a second of a click of an acceptance of a transaction. There's something I believe super powerful about that. And I'm old enough to, CEX still exists, but I'm old enough to remember you pay £50 for a game, right? You've got the CD, the physical disc. You've played out that game, you've completed the game. You take that game to CEX. CEX goes, oh, excellent. We'll give you £5 cash, or you can get £20 in credit. And you go, huh? I paid £50 for that 2 weeks ago. And they said that's the best we can do. Now the very next day you walk into CEX or any store like similar to CEX, that game will be on sale for 40 quid. For 40 quid plus. It's just a monopoly that they've just got on things. Now, if they so choose, the players can choose the level of control that they have over their in-game assets. Imagine playing a franchise and then all the gold coins, for instance, that you collected in Mario World now on the SNES, all of a sudden convert to a certain amount of coins or a certain amount of bonus packs in the 3D Mario on the N64. Like, this is the way that I'm thinking now. Going forward, interoperability, even at its basic level, we get that working smoothly, it will change people's approach to games, because you're not just playing a game because it's fun anymore. You're playing a game because you were so invested in that IP, and you know that there is a benefit to you from interacting with that on top of the serotonin that you would get from just playing it day to day anyway. So I think do I think it's going to change gaming? Yes. Maybe from a front end view, as some people view, not really. Gamers are still going to be gamers. It's still going to play games for the same reasons that they want to play games. But I think it's just adding so much more value as and when people wake up to what Web3 is actually bringing. And I don't even think ramming Web3 down people's throats is even going to matter. It's just going to be blockchain integrated, and that's that. It's going to allow people to trade their assets across the world seamlessly, and that's that. And if you so choose, it changes something slightly where previously only the top percentage of players could play competitively, right, for money. You find a game, whether it be Call of Duty or Clash Royale, you become the best in the world at that game, top 1%, and now you can compete on the global scale and win some prize money. And you need to do that consistently to make some type of survival or wage, right? Great. But now, with assets, if you're smart with your assets, just like you have business on the high street, you can be smart with your assets inside of a game. The more content it brings, the more options that you have to be this sort of e-commerce connoisseur, all whilst playing your player and never having to reveal yourself or expose yourself. You're still fully immersed in this gaming world, and I think that's just a beautiful thing. Sorry,
Well,
that was a bit of a rant.
Yeah, no, that's great. So King 7 Up, hopefully we answered a lot of your question. We could probably go on and on with this at length, but that's going to have to suffice today because we're coming up at the end of our hour, and I want to give you the final word here, Ems, just to make sure people know about Moon Boi and the games you're building. So we're running moonboi.io across the ticker on the bottom. So that's one place you can go, I think. Any other places people should go to check out what you're doing and participate?
I think check us out on X. Check out Moon Boi Universe on X, Moon Boi Studios on X, and that's boy spelled B-O-I. So Moon Boi Universe on X. Jump into the Discord. I don't know if I'm allowed to do giveaways here, but if you want to jump into
go for it, Ems. Right as he's going to give it away, we're going to freeze up here at the end. So that's sort of the theme of this one. So the giveaway, I would say, Ems, please post on the thread right on X. We've got a bunch of people who've chimed in there. Post a link. You're more than welcome to share any links to your project that people could benefit from. That looks like it's it for this end of this hour. I want to just thank everybody for participating. I want to thank Ems for being here. Ems, sorry that you might not be here in the very, very last moments as we wind down the hour, or a little past the hour now. But thanks as always to all of you showed up. There's over 1,000 of you here. That is awesome. I love to see these numbers growing week after week. We really love our community and how engaged you guys, how enthusiastic you are. Love the comments and the questions. If you're watching this on replay, as always, it's going to be my call to action. Show up live next time. Join the 1,000+ people who are live, asking questions, participating, because that really gives you the ability to participate in the community and get your own, feedback into the process. Add your own comments and be able to shape the course of the conversation, because I love that. But until next time, that's it, everybody. Thanks for participating, and we'll see you on the next live stream. Take care.